Thank you. Buenos días. My name is Elia Quintana. I'm the Director of Corporate Development here at ACED. I know that a lot of our companies that I've been working with for the last 6 months are here, and so I want to really thank everybody that has, brought some of the companies and the members that need to listen, all the messaging that we've been working on and engagement over the weekend. We've had a very long, successful conference, and so I really want to thank you for all you do for championing the work that we're doing at your companies. And so we're now starting the day with the ABD panel, which is the Alliance for Board Diversity. It's a collaboration of 4 leading national organizations. Many of your companies are actually working with a lot of these organizations as well. And we have Catalyst, and right now we have a flight delay from Deborah, so we're hoping that she could make it into this panel right now. The other organization is the Executive Leadership Council, ELC, the Hispanic Association on Corporate Responsibility, Leadership Education for Asian Pacifics, LEAP, all working together to advance Hispanics, Asians, African Americans, and women in boards across America. Panelists will discuss the state of women and minorities on corporate boards and how they are working on making the business case for diversity and inclusion in the boardroom. Panelists will also share insights on the Missing Pieces report. Many of you probably remember when I was sharing about participating in that earlier in the year. And also, board diversity census of women and minorities on Fortune 500 boards. We also have the great pleasure of having it moderated by Jorge Plasencia, which maybe a lot of you also know. Jorge Plasencia is the co-founder and chairman and CEO of República, one of America's leading and fastest growing independent multicultural marketing agency. Prior to República, Plasencia served as a vice president and operating manager for Univision Radio. Before Univision, Plasencia was vice president of Estefan Enterprises Incorporated, where he played a vital role in marketing and business affairs for several international artists, including Gloria Estefan and Shakira. Previously, he was the first director of Hispanic marketing for the Florida Marlins during the first World Series in 1997. A member also of Council on Foreign Relations and of the Florida Council of 100, Plasencia was also named Entrepreneur of the Year by Ernest Young and Humanitarian of the Year by the March of Dimes. He is also the CEO of the Year by the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce. He is the co-founder of Amigos for Kids and also Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute. He's also a former chairman of NCLR, National Council of Raza, and he is a former board director for Total Bank. Please give a round of applause for Jorge Plasencia.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those words. My mom would be proud. It gives me now great pleasure to introduce 3 individuals that I highly respect and admire. I will start with Linda. Linda Akutagawa is the president and CEO of LEAP, where she is responsible for LEAP's strategic direction, sustainability, relationships, and collaborations. A beneficiary of LEAP's leadership programming and a passionate social entrepreneur for over 20 years, she has dedicated herself to continuing the cycle of leadership development and inspiring Asian and Pacific Islanders to aspire to leadership roles in all sectors of society. She is a vice chair and an appointed member of the California Department of Education Diversity Task Force. Additionally, she is a member of the Southern California Edison Consumer Advisory Panel, a member of the Asian American Institute Advisory Board at California State University at Los Angeles, and a board member of Japanese American Community Services, a community grant-making organization. She received her bachelor's degree in international business with a minor in economics and from California State at LA. And Linda, I just want to say something to you to your face that I've been saying to some others behind your back, which is I just got back from Asia, my first time to Asia last week, and who's not been to Asia? Okay, that was me. Whenever you can, take 2 or 3 weeks and go. You'll be a changed person when you come back. Yeah. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
Next, Ron Parker. Ron, again, somebody that I've deeply respected and admired for years. Ron Parker is president and CEO of the Executive Leadership Council, He retired from his post of Senior Vice President for HR, Labor Relations, and Global Diversity and Inclusion for PepsiCo, where he was a huge champion for our communities. He's focused on ELC's brand, programs, and overall impact, that they remain strong. As a Senior Vice President at PepsiCo, Parker was responsible for directing the company's global labor relations and diversity, working directly, obviously, with CEO Indra Nooyi. For nearly 30 years, he worked in the beverage and snack food operating division and the corporate office and field and headquarter positions. He previously served as SVP of Human Resources for PepsiCo North America and was responsible for all of its programs. He serves on the Board of Visitors of Howard University School of Business, the Baylor Regional Medical Center in Plano, and the D&I Advisory Board at Procter & Gamble. Honor to have you here. Round of applause for Ron.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, again, someone that I've had the privilege to call a friend for many, 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 many years. And he and I got to serve together on the National Council La Raza board. And I always had a gut feeling that he was going to end up doing something like what he's doing today, because I think that's what God carved him out to do. And that's Sid Wilson, the president and CEO of this organization. Sid was named ACER's president and CEO in July 2014. Wow. 2014, amazing, time flies. Bringing more than 20 years of corporate finance and Wall Street equity research experience to the organization, managing a staff of very talented and dedicated individuals and professionals working closely with corporate board members, Hispanic organizations, and corporate partners around the country. Wilson directs programs and initiatives aimed at encouraging Fortune 500 companies to include Hispanics in the areas of employment, procurement, philanthropy, and governments. His leadership in the corporate sector includes previous service on the Ethnic Advisory Board for PepsiCo and the Consumer Advisory Board for Verizon. He is a former board member, of the National Council La Raza, the former national president of the Dominican American National Roundtable, and a Gold Life member of the NAACP. Ladies and gentlemen, Sid Wilson. So we're going to dive deep into, I've got some questions for these folks. I actually got to prepare for this panel on my 13-hour flight to and 11-hour flight back to Beijing and back from Tokyo. And did a lot of thinking about it. And did a lot of thinking about, although we've evolved and grown so much and there's so much to celebrate about our communities, yet so much, has changed, yet so much has stayed the same in many regards. So I think today's session is going to be a little bit about that, about kind of that sobering reality that we all live, that we're living in corporate America in regard to not only board diversity, but the C-suite and leadership roles. But before that, Ron, I'd love to start with you and just, for those of us that weren't as privy to the role of the Alliance for Board Diversity, can you just tell me about that and tell us about that and what the role is, how it came together? I know you've been involved for a while.
Good.
And would just love to hear more about that.
Good. Well, first of all, let me say good morning. On behalf of all of the ELC member companies that are present, we thank you for supporting our colleague here, Sid Wilson, and the Hispanic Association of Corporate Responsibility, as well as LEAP and Catalyst. And we're hoping that Deborah will be able to make it before we're done. The Alliance for Board Diversity, Jorge, to your point, was formed because each of us saw the need of coming together and leveraging our collective impact. And Linda has been one of the members who was there at the very beginning. The Alliance for Board Diversity, even though you have the Executive Leadership Council with its brand and its focus and its mission, you have LEAP, you have HACR, you have Catalyst, and we also have an executive search firm, Diversified Search, who's a part of that Alliance for Board Diversity. So we came together, I think it was in 2004, where we decided to bring our collective power together to do something that has never been done. That is to report on the census of where women and minorities are or not as it relates to board representation of publicly traded companies. So by launching in 2004 the Alliance for Board Diversity, we committed to really reporting with some degree of frequency what's happening with board governance and the representation of women and minorities and other underrepresented groups in the board room of our major corporations. And this year, we're proud to say we just released the Missing Pieces report in partnership with Deloitte. And Jorge, where we are, I would say, pleased, we are still disappointed that the rate of progress in the year of 2016 as it relates to Blacks, Latinos, Asians, is not moving at the pace that we would like to see it in representation in our corporate boards.
Thanks, Ron. So Linda, that was actually my first question. So why isn't the needle moving? Why do you think the needle's not moving at the speed that it should be, given just the sheer numbers that our communities represent in this country? You know, about 100 million people. I'm a marketer. I love research and data. So about 100 million people in the U.S. Are either Hispanic, African American, Asian, or married into these communities. So it's a huge number. You know, and obviously that's today. Think about the future. So why isn't the needle moving? Why are we still kind of, like Ron's saying, you know, we're kind of pleased, but we're not thrilled with where we're at. So why is that the case?
Well, I think to Ron's point, so first off, I want to say, I mean, there's been some movement, but I feel like maybe I'm going to be the negative Nelly here and just say I think there was some movement, but I feel like it was also partly regaining what we had lost to a degree. And so I think that's another caveat that I want to just put. So I'll just be blunt and I'll say I think part of it is I think people are comfortable with the way things are, and I think they want to try to keep it as long as they can the way it is. And frankly, I mean, I'll just say those who are multiple race, Asian, Black, Hispanic, are the fastest growing segment actually of all of our individual communities combined. And so that means that at some point, somebody is going to be some combination of all of us, right? And to that degree, I think, you know, I think there's a complacency, but I think there's also, frankly, a lack of courage, too. Right. A lack of courage to do what they know is the right thing to do, but people are comfortable. And as I said, you know, I think it's the path of least resistance to keep it the same.
So, okay, so lack of courage. Yeah. Can we expand on what that means? Ron, do you want to take that and I'll go to you next?
Oh, yes. Courage.
Because you've been in companies that championed this and believed in it and had, you know, and walked the walk, talked the talk, had the people in the boardroom, had the executives at the leadership level, blah, blah, blah.
Good.
You name it. So
this is our wake-up call, right?
Exactly.
You guys you got your coffee, you got your bagels, we all good, you've said your
This ain't supposed to be the PC.
Somebody has to be the one to say, look, we got to do what's right. Exactly. And I think that's why I say there's a lack of courage.
And courage is displayed from a leadership position at the very top. It starts at the top. And if the CEO and the board chairman and the nominating head of that committee aren't talking about this, aren't displaying that courageous leadership, aren't really looking at to Linda's point, the demographics, but more importantly, the consumer makeup. Yeah. I mean, women make 88% of the decisions of the household. Latinas and Black women make 99.9%
and in our communities
of decisions on the household.
They make all decisions, right?
And only 2.5% of the Fortune 500 board seats are held by Black women, and said only
it's about 0.8, 0.9%.
That's held by Latinas.
It's unacceptable.
And Asian women, Linda?
The total is about 3.1, so women are about 2, not even 2.2%.
So we don't even hit double digits. We don't even hit high single digits with the people who make purchasing decisions of the households of the American economy that drives all other world economies.
Sid, I was talking to, thanks for that, Ron. You know, I was talking to someone recently who's writing a book on Latino success, right? And featuring some folks in this book and what have you. And, you know, when he was telling me the premise of the book, I was like, wow, you know, and yeah, I would imagine there's been other books like that one written. But what hit a chord with me is we don't tell our story. I'm talking about Latinos now.
Yeah, correct.
We don't tell our stories enough. We don't tell our success stories enough. We don't tell, you know, look at all the faces in this room and folks across this country that are literally impacting this country and the world in so many different ways. But unfortunately, those messages don't reach the C-suite. Unfortunately, those messages, for some reason, many times don't reach what that CEO reads or what that head of governance reads. Why is that? I mean, what are we doing wrong? You know, what are we doing wrong? Because man, we've been at this. I'm 42, and I've been in the U.S. Hispanic market now for well over 20 years, and I've been hearing the chatter for years and years and years, and here we are today. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of companies that are doing it right, and there are a lot of companies that we have to celebrate, and that we have to say, wow, you know, so and so, he or she is an example of doing it right. But there's so many others that you know, we're just a blip on the radar.
Yeah.
So why is that?
Yeah, well, first let me start by just saying buenos dias, you know, good morning, and thank you, Jorge, for moderating. For those of you that don't know, he was very humble with his intro. Jorge runs the largest Hispanic ad agency in the country. And,
one of them.
One of them. You know, and so the largest in my eyes, at least.
Independent. Proud to say one of the top 3 independent multicultural agencies. Proud to say that.
But I also share this for another reason, is that he's also one of the examples of board qualified Latinos, Hispanics, who could serve on a board. And so when I get the question, we're trying to find, and we all laugh when we hear this, we're trying to find qualified Hispanics to serve on a board. And I look at that and I said, where are you looking? Have you called us? Have you called other organizations? Because if you're telling me that you cannot find qualified Hispanics, I've got a bridge to sell you for $1 because there's the reality is that there are highly qualified Hispanics, African American, Asian American women to serve on these boards. The reality is that because 2/3 of board seats are selected by old-fashioned word of mouth, only 1/3 are through search firms. It means that, and it goes to the question of how do we get our message to this group? Because if this group is not hearing our message, and if this group is not acculturating to our community and recognizing that, number one, we are the future, and number two, we are the market power in our country, then you run the risk of losing market share because you didn't get the insight that comes with having a diverse board. And so, I think yesterday it was mentioned that we're so proud that we have about 100 companies that are here today. But at the same time, though, there's 400 that are not. And so the question then is what must we do in order to make sure that those others that are not here, and even broader to the Fortune 1000, that they recognize that not only is it the right thing to do to have a diverse board, but it's a business imperative. I came from Wall Street, and my job actually was to scrutinize companies that did not have a solid board. And one of the things that we looked at as a market valuation is this board reflective of the company's business strategy to move forward? And if your business strategy is to capture a consumer market that's diverse, and you don't have a diverse board, as a Wall Street analyst, that tells me that that's a risk. But as companies recognize that capturing market share, that growing your earnings multiple, which CEOs follow very closely when they're on their quarterly conference calls, that understanding that having a diverse board does add value. It supports the business, and yes, it does improve market valuations. But we need to continue to get that message across. And then lastly, we always get the question, well, what about B2B? And I remind them that, well, you're selling to another company who's selling to the consumer. If you're creating a product that is not that doesn't connect with the consumer, then this company may not buy that product for you. They'll eventually sell to the consumers. So it does apply on the B2B side as well. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, which is why the Alliance for Board Diversity is such an important alliance in this movement.
Jorge, if I may add to that.
Some of our earlier conversation was coming to mind as he was talking.
The messaging.
Right, exactly.
There's an art and a science to really framing the narrative around increasing diversity of publicly traded company boards. The science that's around it is the data. By the year 2030, we will be Blacks, Asians, Latinos, other underrepresented groups. We will be the new majority minority. That brings economic buying power to the table. To Sid's point, we now need to change the narrative around it being a nice thing to do, around the narrative that it will drive sustained company value. We are creating value as a consumer group. I think one of the things around the art aspect of it, so we have to look at the numbers and really keep that in front of our respective corporations as to who we're selling to, who we're servicing. The art aspect of it is that as you are practitioners in your respective organizations, being whether you are head of diversity or head of procurement, head of multicultural marketing, you have to be a student of your organization by looking at when are some of those present board members possibly might be up for re-election or might be cycling off because of age. And you have to go about in a very scientific, artful way of introducing your chairman and those who are making those decisions to people that they don't normally come in contact with. Unfortunately, a lot of our CEOs have been seduced in becoming rock star CEOs, and they don't get exposed to circles that are different than what they're already flying in. So we have to be intentional about, as HR leaders, as chief of diversity officers, of putting our senior team in positions that they are unfamiliar with. What is disappointing to me, and unfortunately I wasn't here during the early in the week, is that we need to have CEOs at the HACR's conference, not their consigliere or not their second in command CEOs, because they're the ones who will see the insights around what's happening, and they are the ones who are in charge of making it happen in their respective organization. Case in point, at PepsiCo, Maurice Cox, my dear friend, David Gonzalez, we always studied our board composition. And anytime we knew there was a person rotating off, we were constantly introducing our CEO to people that they may not see in their everyday walk of life. Lloyd Trotter, a board member of PepsiCo, was interviewed at an EOC meeting. Indra and I were having a conversation, said, you guys have been talking about this guy, Lloyd Trotter, who was the vice chairman at GE, and I knew that we needed an operator to be on the board. She interviewed Lloyd at an EOC meeting, and Lloyd was hired, and she recommended it to a board at an EOC meeting. So my point is, we have to take non-traditional approaches to educate and get our messaging out. Otherwise, we're constantly going to be beating our heads against the same old type of results, because these individuals are so highly, protected is not the word, are so highly regarded with their time that they may not put the full value of being at an event like this that can add to their breadth of understanding.
But you know what, Ron, and I agree, and you know, we'll give them a little bit of cover and defense in that regard, but they should. You know, they live in the United States of America, where they see, you know, the diversity. You know, just come to my city, Miami, or go to Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, Houston, Dallas. I keep, you know. it's there. The diversity is there. And I think what's happened is, using Indra Nui as an example, she loves Miami, as you know. So,
Right.
she's somebody that walks the walk and talks the talk. I mean, Alberto Ibargüen was
Exactly.
he was terming off due to, age.
South Trujillo.
Cesar Conde, who's a
Right.
dear friend and a client of ours, he replaced Alberto. That's somebody that knows, she's also, a diverse background, but
Right.
she knows what she's doing. She knows
Exactly.
how having somebody like Cesar or any of these folks makes her company better. How do we use the Indras of the world more as our kind of shining examples, for other CEOs? And maybe you all do that a lot already at the diversity panel, but I just think that there's CEOs like her that are doing it, and I just think because I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've had the privilege of having friends that are upstate New York or in other parts of the country that live in beautiful areas where all the CEOs live. And I've been to their country clubs, and I've been to dinner at the country clubs, and I've been to these places, and for the most part, it's not people like us that are there.
Right.
So to their defense, and like somebody said to me when I was leaving Univision to start my own business, George, it's lonely at the top.
It is.
It's lonely at the top as a CEO. Again, I'm not giving them cover, but it's the reality. So if they don't have the right people around them too, and on their board, they're going to be very guarded, like you're saying, plus they're rock star CEOs, plus they have to worry about the media, plus the social media, plus CNBC, plus all this stuff. So how do we get on their radar? Linda, how do we get the Indra Nuis on their radars to say, hey, it's worked for PepsiCo. PepsiCo's a better company because of this.
Actually, I want to maybe take a different
Sure,
turn,
yeah.
and maybe this is more social commentary than business commentary.
Okay.
To your earlier question about the stories
Sure.
that are not out there, I think individual exposure is just that. It's just individual. So that one individual that, Indra Nui gets exposed to or introduced to, and, they hit it off and things like that. That's just one person. I think in their mind, they're thinking this person's going to be the exception to the rule. And I think that that's what happens to most people of color, is that they'll meet someone fabulous and think you are the exception to the rule because general stereotypes, perceptions, whatever you want to call it, people say, that Hispanics are like this, Asians are like this, African Americans are like this. And I think that it does all of us a disservice. Because to your point earlier about the lack of stories that are out there, I think the narrative that is out there right now paints the Latino community as being very one-dimensional. And it does the same for African Americans, and it does the same for Asian Americans as well, too. The narratives are different, but it still is a one-dimensional narrative that does not allow for a much more nuanced look, which then gives people this perception that, so if Latinos are like this, and they meet somebody that think, oh, you are the exception to the rule, but you're the only one, and so you are special. But without understanding that it does a disservice to the broad swath of the Latino community in the US who are highly successful, who are doing lots of great things. And I think that's where they get into this kind of mindset of, well, we can't find anybody because the special one has already been appointed to this board or that board. And they're not really on a lookout, I think, for people that are already right smack in front of them already. And I think that that's what is leading to some of these challenges. Does it mean it's a media campaign? I don't know if it's as simple as that. I don't think it is, but I think there really does behoove all of us to really think, how do we change this narrative? And what does that mean? And I'm not, this is something, frankly, that I've been racking my brains about for the Asian American community. How can we change
And you're
the
such a
narrative?
champion. I've seen her out there. She's such a champion for her community.
But
And,
it's the same thing
you know,
for
she
all.
beats her drum in a big way.
So-
She
But
does.
Jorge, not to interrupt here, we have data that says when there are diversity in the boardroom, to Sid's point, those companies outperform their peer group at a rate that is twice that of the norm.
Sure.
So it bears itself out in data. So you have to ask, why then aren't other companies following that type of trend.
Do you want to take that?
And let me even add on that, and I'm going to give an example of something. I'm not going to mention the company's name because the company's actually not in business anymore, but which is,
Yeah,
again, I wonder why. But
Maybe you should mention their name.
how many remember the Sensen burner bill that came out back in 2005? Remember that bill that said that if you give a drink of water to someone who's undocumented, you can be you can be arrested for for breaking this law. It passed through Congress, huge uproar, and then 2006 was all those rallies. Well, during that year, when I was actually trying to assess what does this mean for companies, I did an assessment at the time of companies that could be exposed if they don't get onto the forefront. And there was a company that had virtually no diversity on their boards. There was no African American, no Latino, no. In fact, I'm not sure they even had a woman on the board. Maybe possibly one. But but I went to them and said, well, your competitors actually have a more diverse board, more diverse executives. How are you addressing this? And their approach was a marketing approach. Well, we're going to advertise in the sports and this as if that's the solution. And I said, I have to tell you that as an analyst, this could risk you market share. Well, fast forward a year, competitor same-store sales were up. This one's same-store sales was down. 2 years later, same-store sales up there, flat there. So what's happening? What you saw was this company started losing market share, and eventually, as market share got lost, and by the way, there's Deborah Gillis, president of Panelist. She made it.
You made it. So glad.
Blame LaGuardia Airport. That's what it is. But thank you. So glad she made it. But to finish the story is that almost 3 years after that happened, the company that did not pay attention to what was happening with their consumers, who were purchasing their products, eventually got dinged with their brand, and as a result, went to their competitor. And those of you that are in business know is that it's one thing to acquire a customer, but when you lose a customer to your competitor, it's far more costly to get that customer back.
Big time.
And so that is where when we're thinking about the business case as to why it's so important to have a diverse board, had that company done the right thing from the very beginning, prior to that situation happening, they would have known from the board, we need to get out to the forefront. We have to have a communication strategy. We need to make sure that, that we're having a dual language strategy. And so that way we can get to the forefront, because there were many companies that were exposed in that situation, but this one didn't pay attention to it because they didn't understand the importance of diversity on their board.
It's no longer around.
Absolutely.
So, so great to welcome you, Deborah, to the
We saved all the hard
Detroit.
questions. We saved all the hard questions for you, Deborah.
No,
so
but
have at it.
it's and obviously CEO, President, CEO, Catalyst, her bios in your books. I'm just going to, we've been having a phenomenal conversation just about, the not so phenomenal reality that we're living, obviously with Latinos, African Americans, Asians, and of course women. Why do you think we're in this place where the needle's barely moving? And and like Sid was saying, we keep hearing, they just don't exist. We can't, we just can't find the person. Well, I don't know if you read that, in about a year you'll have a new Latina, I would imagine, available to sit on corporate boards. That's my dear friend, Congresswoman Ilian Ross-Layton, the first Hispanic woman in Congress. There's so many out there. There's so many out there. Why is this, Deborah? And welcome to Detroit, and great to have you here.
Thanks. And apologies, everyone. This grand entrance brought to you by Newark Airport and United Airlines.
You didn't get thrown off. That's a good thing.
Really sorry to have missed the conversation. So, I agree completely with your comments. This, we know, is not a supply problem. It's a demand problem, and we need to create more demand. And part of what's interesting for me when I look at some of the data is that it tells us that women of color are twice as likely as white women to be recycled on corporate boards. So there's a piece in this that's about proving that you've done it before you are given the opportunity. And it is what we often refer to as the performance bias, certainly that we see for women, where there's a difference between being judged based on performance versus potential. So getting the first opportunity is really critical, because once you're in, you're kind of in.
Sure.
So there's a part of this where we really need to drive demand, and it's not, again, that there aren't qualified candidates. It's that you aren't looking for them in the right places. It's not that they're not there, you don't know them. And so that's part of certainly the challenge, and why I think it's incumbent on all of us who are certainly interested in board service to do a few things that we can help give us a leg up. And one of them is enhancing our visibility, being known in public spaces, talking to the people we work with to tell them that we want to serve on boards, asking our CEO if we're executives for their support within organizations, making board service part of what is viewed as professional development and succession planning for the CEO chair. So there's a bunch of things that we can do to help break through, but a big part of this needs to be that boards are being intentional in looking at skills. They're looking in different places. They're putting policies in place and practices that result in more turnover of seats, so that more seats are available for diverse candidates to step up. So it's a complex group of things that need to happen to bust that myth that it's a supply issue, which we know it isn't.
You know, the one thing, and thank you, the one thing that I think is always the elephant in the room in a lot of what we do is, the stereotypes, all Hispanics are X, all Hispanics don't do this, all Hispanics don't do that, or African Americans or Asians, you can put any, women, whatever. In my role in marketing, many times with clients is, kind of that educational process of really having them understand what's relevant to us as a community, and what we're going to think is a little like you're patronizing us or what have you. And I just think that, as I deal with clients all the time, some really get it, and some we're still just so ways away. The way that they see us as communities is again siloed, not part of just their mainstream prerogative that we call it at República the multicultural mainstream. This country has changed, and you either change with it, or you're going to be left behind like that company. So I guess my last, before we open it up to questions, and I'll be doing that in a minute. My last question is, Ron, we were talking about earlier, racism, stereotypes, all that. How much of that is still prevalent today? I know it's the elephant in the room many times, but how much of this is that, especially in our communities of color? How much of it is that?
It is still there. It is it's masked on a very sophisticated level of behavior, and we need to call it out. And it starts with us. One of the underlying principles of the Alliance for Board Diversity, not only for us sharing with the world what the underrepresentation of women and people of color and underrepresented groups on boards, but it also is the behavior of how we behave as a group. Now, I can sit up here being a part of a black organization that is comprised of the most senior level black organizations or senior level C-suite positions in major corporations, and solely focus on what's black about it. But being a part of the Alliance for Board Diversity, the ABD, we are displaying the type of behavior that if there is a black on a board, but yet there is not an Asian, I should be advocating to get an Asian on that board. If there's a black and an Asian on the board, I should be advocating to get a white female or Latino on that board. We have a tendency, to your point around racism, to behave in a way that keeps us in our lanes that are most familiar and that which we are most comfortable with. I will leave this earth hopefully not only being known as Roncito Charles Parker, since I'm here with you guys. My given name is Ronald, but I will go by Roncito this week. But I also want to be known as a disruptor
Sure.
and be willing to do that which will change for the good. So while the data says that, yes, white women made more progress in our most recent report, I am proud to say that Deborah is out there asking, well, what are you doing with blacks, with Asians, and with Latinos to have that same level of progress when we do our second iteration of reporting next year? That's the kind of behavior that we need to display to get beyond some of the sophisticated racism that do exist in our corporations.
Do you want to build, any of you want to build on this?
Yeah, let me build on what Ron mentioned. Is that, and I'm even going to cite quote Deborah on because Catalyst had at Gala, I think it was 2 years ago, had a phrase that I thought was so appropriate. It's called "disrupt the default," and there is a default that is in the board environment, and I think that it's time to disrupt that default, and part of that may mean going to the question in terms of what some things we need to do is that we, while being at these conferences are also great, we also need to make sure that we're present in a lot of these industry-specific conferences where we know there's a high tendency to have a certain population of CEOs. Going to Ron's point, that where you're getting that CEO attention. One of the things that we're doing more frequently is looking at these industries, whether it's the retail, automotive, oil and gas, high tech. And of course, I want to recognize, of course, Andre Abelias was head of high tech, who does a lot within this group. But also within other different industries. In other words, industry conferences where there's a high tendency to get CEOs, because that's where we're going to get their face on. The second part is, and this is something that I said does, is we buy shares. We buy shares so that we have access to annual shareholder meetings. And often those are opportunities for us to be able to address the board and the CEO to do this, because that means that it's not just us advocating on behalf of the communities, but we're actually advocating as shareholders. Because we obviously want to show that that having diversity does increase shareholder value. And you can do that on the financial statement, on the balance sheet. You can make a strong business case for a good diverse board. But those are some things that we will need to do, and we need to call on more to come out of, as Ron mentioned, some of their, I guess what you want to call the guarded circle of comfort zone, right, and come into conferences. And of course, I do want to recognize, of course, many of the CEOs that do this. Of course, I know we mentioned Nuyi. I do want to recognize Brian Cornell, the CEO of Target, who was a host CEO of the CEO Roundtable, who has 2 Hispanics on the Target board of directors, and many other CEOs that are there.
Bank of America has a...
Bank of America, and of course, we saw Mary Barr, who spoke here yesterday. We have our CEO Roundtable this afternoon that's led by Mark Fields, the CEO of Ford Motor Company. And those who I think get it, but we need more CEOs to recognize the importance of coming into the community. But we also need to say we're not going to wait for that to happen. We're going to go to those industry conferences and buy shares to be visible at those shareholder meetings.
Now, Jorge, may I do ask this piece, and I think we will all say this. We are seeing movement, given that to Deborah's point, because boards are really asking their CEOs do not serve on any more than 2 boards, because they have their day job and their fiduciary job by serving another board. So what we're beginning to see is that organizations are looking beyond CEOs, which was the traditional pool, to other C-suite jobs. And the C-suite jobs we are seeing where we're getting the most activity is CFO, CTO, Chief Technology Officer, and Chief Risk Officer. We're also seeing some movement in the legal side because of all of the regulatory oversight that is required in all of our companies, we're beginning to see a little bit of pull of general counsels and people with law degrees being asked to serve on boards because it gives a company tremendous insight. So to Deborah's point, we are beginning to see cracks in the ceiling.
Sure.
Going beyond the traditional pool of CEOs to other C-suite positions. So we challenge you to do your jobs and be proficient in your role as a leader, as a professional, so that if you have an interest in serving on a board, especially in those areas of finance, technology, and governance, that you will be attractive as we try and push some of these companies out to other sources other than just CEOs.
So
Yes,
I want to
Linda.
comment on,
Sure.
on the earlier question
Sure.
around stereotypes and
Right.
racism and all that. And I'm just going to say, I think there's a two-way street about it. And,
Sure.
and I say that only because I've had some recent conversations, and you know, sometimes I feel like the higher up you get, if you're let's say you're Hispanic, Asian, you know, African American, or even a woman, right? I mean, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. The higher up somebody gets, the more reluctant or more risk averse they become in terms of advocating for their own community members, right? And I think I'm going to say that I think that is also part of the challenge. It's
great
not
point.
just overt
It's a great
racism
point.
from, and it's not even overt, it's just very subtle,
Subtle.
nuanced, you know,
Yeah.
some people may even say unconscious bias, right?
Right.
But I think sometimes
point.
our community members are sometimes our worst roadblocks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to hold, you know, these folks accountable.
great point.
And that means, you know, as you climb in your career, don't forget this point, right? And then don't let others forget that point, because if we're not advocating for ourselves, then who is? And sometimes it is going to be other people that will be advocating for us. So I think the other point that I want to make is sometimes we can't just look to members of our own community. Sometimes our best allies might be somebody from another community,
Sure.
because it's easier for them to advocate for somebody else other than their own. And
Sure.
it's unfortunate that it has to be that way. One last point that I also want to make to what Ron just said. I heard a woman speak, Nina Vasquez, a couple years ago.
Nina.
And you were there at that
Yeah.
event, right? Yeah, when she
Yeah.
talked about what she started to prepare for her first board seat roughly about 10 years before she even felt she was ready.
Wow.
She was doing that because she was thinking long-term in terms of what kind of places do I need to be seen?
Well-
What kind of positions do I need to be getting myself onto so that I am going to be seen as a candidate viable and ready for this board position? So you can't just wake up one day and say, I want a board seat. You need to be starting now. Think about the choices that you're making in terms of your career, your outside activities that are going to help position you for those kind of roles, and look to the future, not what's happening now.
It's so important. That's such a great point, because I think we many times as our groups, you know, we stay within, like you said, our lanes. You know, we preach to our own choirs. We don't get out there. And you know, something I did about 5 years ago, not thinking of board membership, just of my business and expanding my mind, was I went to the Aspen Ideas Festival. Before the Aspen, it was like the third year, let's say, of the Aspen Ideas Festival. And I remember getting there, and Leisha Ward and I were the only two minorities, pretty much,
Right.
in the entire Ideas Festival.
Right.
You know, for Leisha and I, it was like, wow. You know, we hung together. We're dear friends. We hung together. But you know, and I remember saying to her, we got to beat the drum here. Good news is now Monica Lozano is doing the Aspens Latinos in Societies thing. Things have begun to change. But we went up to the powers that be at Aspen that year and said, guys, you need more diversity here. Oh, well, you know, we send it out into the communities, don't show up. It may be true, so we got to show up.
Yep.
You know, who said, I just went blank, 80% of life is showing up. You know, who said that? Anyway, I forgot. But it'll come to me.
How about this one? If you're not
It'll
at the
come to me.
table, you're on the menu.
If you what?
If you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
That's exactly right. You're on the menu. So with that, I mean, Deborah, I don't know if you want to add anything. I just want to open up to them, because I know you were a little, you know,
Just
I know
two
they'd
things.
love to hear more from you is what I'm trying to say.
Just two things. There is an intentionality that's required.
Right.
intentionality in how we go about positioning ourselves for board seats. And I think for anyone who's interested in serving on a board, part of it needs to be, we have to be able to articulate why. Why do I want to serve on a board, and what is the unique value add that I bring? Because the idea that it's just kind of next step in career after you finish, you need to, crack that nut and be able to uniquely talk about what you bring, but also the intentionality of leaders looking for and ensuring that there are diverse faces, diverse pools, diverse consideration in terms of panels that are making these selections. So, to Ron's point that we each intentionally draw attention to these issues, not just for our own specific community, but for each other really matters. So whether that's the research that we do collectively or the fact we show up places to role model what it means and what we look like.
Sure.
I mean, we always say, look at us. This is the demographics of the country that need to be reflected in leadership.
It's right here. So Woody Allen, by the way, was the one that said
Let me also say real quickly that
80% of success is showing up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very true. And I think just to say is that as we move forward, and this is something that the Alliance for Board Diversity is really promoting is that this is the time now we have to double down on diversity. Of course, we've been doing a lot on the employment side, but it's time to double down on diversity. So when it comes to board level diversity, because we know that the corporate culture starts at the board. The culture that is created by the board is resonated through the CEO and then down to the executive team and all the way through into the front line. And given the fact that that the numbers are not where they should be, it's we have to look at what strategies have worked and what has not and what needs to be adjusted. But it's time to double down on diversity.
Okay, with that, we are going to open it up to questions from you all. If anybody has any questions, please. There's mics in the middle of the room. Just go up to the mic. Please introduce yourself, your name, what you do, company, and just ask away.
Good morning. My name is Luis Franco. I'm with Bank of America in compliance. And we've talked about diversity and the impact that it has on performance.
Can you please raise the volumes a little for us up over here for someone? Just raise it a little bit.
Can you hear me well?
Speak a little louder, yeah.
Yeah, a little louder. Thank you.
So we were talking about diversity and the impact it has on performance. I was wondering if you could share any data points or items in general that we could look to drive that we could look at when trying to make the business case and trying to drive the correlation in our workplace.
Well, let me give you an overall perspective on this. Let's look at the P&L, the financial statement. You start with revenue, and we know that if you're going to have an impact on revenue, you have to have a great marketing strategy. You have to have a great communication strategy. What about cost of goods sold? What are the products that are resonating with diverse communities? Because if you're selling products that don't resonate, then you may miss the mark on cost of goods sold. SG&A. That's where diversity and employment diversity comes in. Because if you have a corporate culture, then that means that you're going to have an increased level of retention. Because as you know, if you have high turnover, that means that the cost of getting new employees starts to go up, and that impacts SG&A. I just gave you right there a quick answer on what happens with operating profit margin. And so if you're trying to manage your operating profit margin, which Wall Street looks at very closely, then you're looking at all those P&Ls. But then I'll even talk quick on the balance sheet. Goodwill, as you know, is the intangible. That's considered the brand value. Well, if your brand value is either being overvalued because of the fact that that you are, the business is not reflecting what it could do, then at some point the market starts saying you might be overvalued, and that might lead to a write-down. And as you know, from a firm standpoint, you would never want to have a write-down of goodwill because you were not paying attention on diversity. So I just gave you a quick financial thing. I did a TED Talk about 2 years ago, going through the whole P&L. And so anytime I hear I can't quantify the impact of diversity, come talk to me. I'll show you something different.
Thank you.
Yeah, McKinsey also has a report that's out there that does some sector comparisons that you could take a look at, and we'll get that report to you. I think you said Bank of America.
That's right.
But also Catalyst has done some reporting on different sectors of where there's more, I think, 2 or more women on the boards and how they perform in the marketplace with their peer group. One of the things that we're going to be doing as an ABD, in addition to our census reporting on representation of boards, is to also go deeper on showing the value dynamic of like companies in a given sector who have X number of diversity on their board to those who don't, and actually reporting that out to you as well. So that's some additional information that we're going to be doing as an ABD. But McKinsey and Catalyst has some information that you can get your hands on today.
Thank you.
Ma'am? Seems like, okay.
Microphone working?
One, let's see, our friend back there.
Let's do a countdown.
Microphone?
Yeah.
And maybe someone can from the back and fix that microphone while she's going on.
Hi, Vanessa Avanzini, Capital One. My question is around sponsorship. So sometimes doing a good job and being visible isn't enough to get to some of those spots. Do you have any recommendations or suggestions on things that you can do or tips that you can do when approaching someone to sponsorship? Or what should that relationship look like before you approach
Do you understand
someone?
what you're saying? You're saying sponsorship, like people sponsoring with you within companies? Like executive sponsoring?
Right, yeah.
Right. Ron, do you want to speak to that?
Well, sponsorship is really a dynamic between 2 individuals, or in some cases, the individual and an entity. And it starts with trust. My experience in 30 years at PepsiCo, I have seen people ask for sponsors in a very formulaic way. I've seen it at Target with people like Brian Cornell, where he's the new CEO, and people say, I'd love for you to sponsor me. Well, then, first of all, let's make sure we understand exactly what's involved in this dynamic as a sponsor. A sponsor, especially at that C-suite level, it is unrealistic to think that they will avail themselves to you 24/7. They got other things to do. So that sponsor is that person who has observed your performance over time and will act on your behalf when you're not in the room at the highest level of the enterprise.
Great point.
Because that's where that investment of that relationship is going to pay out. It is, and as I scan the room, it's important to understand the steps in getting to a sponsor is secure an authentic mentoring relationship first, because it is through mentoring that you will gain sponsorship. Because in a lot of cases, the sponsor you may not be aware of that sponsor, but you should be very intimate with your mentor. And my point is, make sure you understand the rules of engagement. Because if you come to me and ask me to mentor you, I'm going to ask for something in return. The first thing I'm going to ask for is consistent, above expectations performance. Otherwise, you're wasting my time. Plain and simple. I'm old, I can say that and get away with it, all right? But if you're seeking sponsorship, that is more strategic, because that sponsor is going to use that collateral at the appropriate time to break the tie, to change the trajectory, to disrupt the system, because he or she sees something in you that is being undervalued, and you need that additional support to break through. So, and sponsors can come from all levels throughout the organization. And I'll end with this because I know Deborah has a point. Titles don't drive who you seek as a mentor and or a sponsor. I've had administrative assistants who've been my sponsor when I've worked for executives because they tell me exactly what's going on when maybe others don't want to share with
We've
me
all had those,
what's
right?
going on.
Yeah.
And we have all had those, right? So be careful as to who you may deem and put in that sponsor category versus those who are mentors.
Great
And I'll
point.
end with that.
Deborah.
I'll just add a couple of things. So one, Ron is absolutely correct. Sponsorship is earned. That's the first thing. Bottom line, it's earned based on your performance. So giving visibility to your performance so you're in the right places so people see you performing so they will act as a sponsor is really important. Always remember the distinction between a mentor and a sponsor. Mentor talks to you, sponsor talks about you. It's critically important, given what I said earlier about the performance versus potential dynamic that we see for women and people of color. If there is a view that you must have already done it in order to be given an opportunity, then the sponsor, by virtue of lending their credibility to you, really gets over that kind of barrier, because them saying, no, she or he is ready for this role can be the key differentiator in who gets those senior roles. The other piece comes back to what I talked about earlier around intentionality. In organizations, we need to acknowledge the fact that sponsorship happens. It is a real part of the process, and we need to acknowledge that it tends to benefit some groups over others. And if that's the case, then we need to build into our talent management and promotion systems processes that help to mitigate that disadvantage that's basically baked into the system. But it requires an open conversation that says, people admitting the only reason I'm here is not because I'm the sharpest knife in the drawer. I had some people who helped me along the way, and we need to make sure that that help is being given to everyone who deserves it fairly. And that comes back to the process piece that needs to shift in organizations. We have a short tool on our website, catalyst.org, that describes specifically the difference between a coach, a mentor, and a sponsor, what those roles are, and how you can best leverage those relationships. So if you go on our website, you can find that.
Thank you.
Good job.
Next.
Good morning. This is Rosanna Goni with PepsiCo. I'm still concerned about the pipeline for the board diversity many, many years from now. I've had the opportunity, the privilege to attend many, many college graduations in the Northeast and in the South. I don't see diversity when I see the caps and gowns. How do you challenge those schools? How do you force them to give you the diverse population that is needed?
Do you want to?
Let me take a shot at that answer, because I was very involved in the community college movement. I actually served on the national board of the Association of Community College Trustees at the time when there were only the diversity is very low on these college boards, and I know that, of course, Dr. Antonio Flores, who's the head of the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, is really pushing to advocate for more presidents, more diverse presidents, but also more diverse boards. Now, I know some parts of the country is getting on a college board, you have to get elected, and some parts are appointed. But the key thing is that when you look at prominent nonprofit boards, your college boards, your museum boards, your hospital boards, institutions that have a higher tendency to have board members who also serve on a corporate board. If those boards are not diverse, when those 2/3 of board seats that are filled by word of mouth and they're going to those prominent large nonprofit boards and they're not seeing diversity, they're going to go to that pool and say this person is good for a corporate board, which means that there does need to be work that needs to be done to make sure that these very prominent institutions that may lack diversity to also do the same thing, because that addresses that pipeline of how we position us to get ready for more of these boards. And that's just one of the many solutions there. But I think the other part of that is as we were mentioning earlier, is that we have to get the message out there. The media needs to do more in terms of reporting on examples of diversity, and so those are some things that we can do. But you're very correct that when you look at how the word of mouth happens, it often happens being in these other environments and live communities, and they go with who they know. Versus who's the right person for that board seat. Because sometimes it's they go with more with who they trust versus who's the best qualified person for that board seat.
Mm-hmm. Did I understand your question differently, though? Were you asking more about how to get more Latinos and other diverse people into the college and university system so that they're graduating because they form the backbone of the pipeline that is supposed to be diverse?
Exactly.
I think that was what
okay.
I mean, more about the students, correct?
Exactly. That's, these are the kids that are going to fill those positions 15, 20 years from now.
I mean, unfortunately, I don't know, from my perspective, I think we're talking about something that's going to be way more complicated than what we could discuss on this panel here. I mean, we could, I seem to be taking the social advocate role today. But I mean, obviously there's a lot of factors in terms of pipelines into colleges, community colleges, and even four-year universities. There's the issues around cost. There's the issues around K through 12 schools and what's being done to help funnel kids through a system that is not necessarily always set up equally for them, to get them prepared and to a place where they feel like college is even a viable option for diverse students, and particularly those that are more financially strapped, I would say. And it's crazy. I saw a headline that in San Francisco, if you're making $100,000, you are considered low income. I mean, that just seems ridiculous, right? I mean, whoever thought that?
So I just want to say, I mean, there is a glimmer of hope. I mean, where I'm from, South Florida, I mean, FIU, Florida International University, I mean, it's, it's 80% diverse. The student body. Miami-Dade College, I'm vice chair of the board of the foundation there. It's again about 70-80%. So I think if you go to cities across the country, either community colleges or public universities, you're going to find that a lot of those, UT San Antonio, places like that are very, UTEP, University of Texas at Paso. I mean, those places are very, very diverse and very Hispanic. I think as we look maybe at more Ivy League schools, yes, I mean, we got to crack the code a little deeper there. The good news is that 6-7 years ago, Latinos were dropping out at staggering rates. Latinos and African American students were dropping out at staggering rates. Many times, not to go into gangs and do stuff like that, many times because they had to provide for their homes. They had to, go work. Today, more and more Hispanic kids are enrolling in college and completing college. I don't have the exact numbers, but the paradigm is starting to shift. So that's the good news. So anytime you want to come down to Miami and go to FIU or Miami-Dade College, love to take you to one of our graduations. It's very humbling to watch.
But I would, if I may add to that, the approach is similar to the approach that we've taken with here at the Alliance of Board Diversity. The college system is so large. It's a huge construct. I would say do your homework and find at the very top where you can find that ally. It may be with I think it's called the Association of College Accreditation. You may start there and say, okay, if I start there, then how do I work down the system to make progress? And to Jorge's point, have some best practice universities that do have that diversity and the makeup of the administration and the student body. That is an example that you can hold up. It is very similar to the approach that we've taken. We realize that the four of us, along with Diversified Search, who are part of the Alliance for Board Diversity, we can't do it by ourselves. So we have reached out and formed an alliance with the institutional investors, CalPERS and CalSTRS. They are the large investors of pension funds, of teachers, police, firemen in the respective cities. So they too have joined with us on being and asking their companies that they invest in to be more transparent around their governance and diversity and board composition. So my point is, start at the top, find some allies, and then you can start to make some progress, especially when you're dealing with a large system like our college system.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
I just want to say, I want to bring this back to the individual too. I think every one of you can also impact, this pipeline. And it's easy to say, but this could be part of your consideration of your philanthropic endeavors. Because I think what Sid said is very true. Getting onto some of these big nonprofit boards should be part of your consideration, but think about where is it that you think you can make the most impact. And if you're not in a city where there's a large Latino population like Miami or LA or New York, or in Texas somewhere, you may be in another place where you still have a significant Latino population, but perhaps not as much, and the numbers are low. I think sometimes we tend to discount what we individually can also do as well too. And sometimes even if you're impacting 1, 2, 3 lives, that is still 1, 2, 3 lives impacted. So think about that as well too.
So I think we're out of time. I just want to say thank you to you all for listening and for these folks for the great questions. It's been an honor and privilege, Deborah, Ron, Linda, and Sid, to sit up here with you all. I commend you for what you do. Please continue. I know the hard fight that you are all doing every day for all of our communities. And Ron, you mentioned majority-minority country in 2030. That sounds like a long ways away, but it's 13 years away. So that's around the corner. So we gotta keep this going. So thank you each so much. Thank you all, and enjoy your time here. Thank you.
Good, thank you.